Who do you think you are? It's a question Ancestry.com is answering for our Colleen Marshall.
We have been following Colleen's journey into her family's past, and last week we learned how her mother's family history is closely aligned with that of her hometown. But tonight we hear about a secret from your father's side.
And you know, it's a really tragic tale, but I never knew, none of us ever knew, about a man that we had never heard of. He sacrificed everything for his family, but his story has been buried until now. Mountains and mining, the hallmarks of my hometown, the legacy of my family. My mother has deep roots here. Did you look into my mother's side or my father's side?
So we've looked into your dad's side. What do you know about your dad's side?
Oh, and my dad's side. Anastasia was here to talk about my father. He was second youngest of 11. His father's side, the O'Connors of Ireland's County Cork. His mother's maiden name was Bainbridge, part English, or so we all thought. Anastasia begins with the 1900 census that shows Robert Bainbridge, Bridget, his wife, 3 other children, and then Catherine and Mary McCune. Mary was my grandmother. Why did she have a different last name?
Well, let's look at how her relationship to the head of the house was Robert.
She was a stepdaughter?
What does that suggest to you?
She was not a Bainbridge?
Bridget's her mother, but Robert is not her father, at least biologically.
Wow, I never knew that. So who was her father? The answer lies in the next record she uncovered, Robert and Bridget's marriage license.
Fantastic thing about this record is these 2 questions right here. Date of death for man's former wife, if any, and date of death for woman's former husband, if any.
James McCune, my great-grandfather, dead at the age of 32.
We know that Bridget and her daughter and Mr. McCune came over in 1886, okay? And then 4 years, and we don't know at the beginning or the end or whenever, 4 years later, he dies. But by this time, she has a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old.
The 3-year-old is my grandmother.
The 3-year-old being your grandmother, yes.
He died June 16th, 1890. That date led to the next clue.
This was written, as you can see, in 1942, so this is 60 years later. Smoke still rises over Dunbar mine disaster site. 31 trapped in explosion 60 years ago.
And so it begins, a tragic tale of a loud and terrific explosion that shook the dwellings and made the earth tremble. Disaster so horrific, evidence of it lingered for decades. The long-forgotten Hill Farm mine sat across from an old cemetery, less than a mile from my house. But I never knew it existed.
Over here on this hill, this is where the mine disaster took place. And June 16th, 1890, this town changed because there was this huge mine explosion.
Newspaper accounts say 35 men went 800 feet down, a mile from the entrance. Some went into a shaft on the right, others branched to the left. But there were water and ventilation problems at the mine, and as an air shaft was being drilled, they hit water and it gushed into the mine.
The mine inspection report tells the horrible story of what happened next. A young miner by the name of Willie Hay tried to rush into the mine to warn his friends that water was coming in. But as he passed through the borehole, the open flame on his helmet touched off the gas, igniting the explosion. His father rushed in to save Willie. They both died. They're buried here together.
A witness drew this sketch of the blinding, strangling smoke. In a short time, about a score of blackened figures scrambled gasping from the mine. The anxious family searched the faces. They were the lucky ones. Where were the others?
Oh, that's so sad. Yeah, we can imagine that poor Bridget, with her 2 young children, were right there.
2 men were already dead. One shaft was burning, but not the shaft where the men were entombed and sounds were heard. So a desperate dig began on the opposite side of the Hill Farm mine. The would-be rescuers were asked to line up and identify themselves, for they may never come out again. For 16 days they frantically dug. Not one of them had over 2 hours sleep a day, only to learn the maps they followed were wrong. They were nowhere near the doomed men. The Hill Farm mine was bricked closed, and the rescue at Dunbar was abandoned.
Danny boy, I love you so.
31 men died that day. There were fathers and sons among the dead, and brothers, and James McCune. It would be 2 years before the mine could be breached again for the last sad act.
The last 3 of the Hill Farm mine victims were found in the main slope today. The presence of checks, like paychecks and other articles on their bodies, were all that led to their identification. And here we learn.
Wow, it's him.
James McCune. So now we know his name.
Wow.
32.
So he was one of the last bodies found?
He was. He was the last body found, as far as we've been able to understand.
My great-grandfather was identified by the buttons on his clothing, the tobacco in his pockets, and his thick hair. Part of a brotherhood of immigrants who sacrificed so much to bring their young families to America.
Obviously, this is a tragic story. We have Jit, who comes here with an infant and her husband, has a baby right away. Her husband dies. There's 2 years before this explosion and before they found his body and could lay him to rest. I mean, that's 2 years of not having closure. But in April, they find him, they have closure, and then in August of that year, she marries Robert Bainbridge.
My father's family was close. We'd often gather to eat, to drink, to sing old Irish tunes, to tell family stories. How is it possible that I never heard this one?
One of the things we learned today is that on your dad's side, you're completely Irish. Because O'Connor and Connor's Irish, McCune is going to be Irish.
And now I have something to tell the rest of the family.
I am not who I thought I was.
And they aren't either.
Now, I do want to give a thank you. Next Monday, we're going to share the story, by the way, with my family. I've already talked to them, so you'll get to see the surprise reaction from everybody. And I want to thank the Dunbar Historical Society once again. Just last year, believe it or not, they put together this booklet about the Hill Farm mine disaster. They have information now online. They were looking for descendants of the Hill Farm mine disaster last year, and were having trouble finding them, not knowing that it was my family and we were among the descendants.
Wow, it's amazing the records they're able to find, like we were talking about. Thank goodness for newspapers to have that right there.
And the details of some of the, and there's also mine inspectors' reports. These books are fascinating. If you're interested in mining or whatever, you can go to our website, search Dunbar online.
Incredible journey. Thank you, Colleen.
Thanks, Colleen.
Thanks.
So who do you think you are? You can find out with Ancestry.com. We are giving away 4 World Explorer annual memberships to Ancestry.com. You can register to win at NBC4i.com. Search Ancestry, and we'll announce the winners on May 22nd.
Good stuff.
It's coming right up, just about a week away.
It is.
Winner announced, huh? Cool.
Jim Ganal's with us. Tell you what, interesting weather day today. It seemed like it was going to rain for a long time, but we never really got the big downpour.
No, the rains have been moving away from us. Skies have been